Okay.
Looks like we are live, Larry.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to our special work session. As a reminder, this was, I guess, Larry's idea actually to create more meetings for all of us, but actually to be able to focus on one or two items when it's not at the end of a meeting and we have some energy to discuss them. And our goal is to have them be about 90 minutes. Tonight, we'll try to take the under since the Knicks are playing again. But I think this is, these are kind of interesting items that deserve their own kind of focus. So the first item is review of the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act. And I think my biggest noticeable thing is that it's spelled with an H in the act, which apparently is correct.
Yeah, spelled both ways here.
Yeah, which is, I never found that out until I got involved.
Makes you think about reefer madness.
Yeah.
Okay, so I believe that Mary Ann's going to take us through various options. So if you want to take that on and
before we get to the options, I mean, just give an overview, about what you can do and what you can't do, which is a lot more what you can't do than what you can do. So what this law did was it created a whole new chapter in the statutes called the Cannabis Law. And there's that chapter 7A, the Cannabis Law, plus the act includes amendments to a number of other provisions of state law, like the criminal procedure law, the penal law, vehicle and traffic law, tax law. Under the new law, recreational marijuana is now legal in New York. It was legal March 31st. So New Yorkers 21 and over are allowed to possess up to 3 ounces of pot for recreational use. They're also allowed to use it and consume it and to give it to other people who are also 21. It can be smoked anywhere that it's legal to smoke tobacco. Where you can't smoke tobacco, like, schools, workplaces, inside restaurants, and places of transportation. There's a number of other areas listed in the New York Public Health Law. If you can't smoke tobacco, you can't smoke marijuana. And it also can't be smoked anywhere that the village prohibits smoking, which would be the park, right now, the parks. And I imagine Village Hall too. I don't know if you allow smoking in Village Hall, but anyway. So those changes became effective March 31st, and local governments don't have the authority to opt out any of those. Additionally, it will be legal to grow up to 6 cannabis plants, 3 mature and 3 immature in one's private residence or on one's private property. For households with more than 2 adults, the limit is 12. And those provisions won't take effect until the Office of Cannabis Management enacts regulations on it, which don't have to be done until 18 months after the first authorized retail sale of cannabis. So it's unlikely that home cultivation will be allowed before 2024. But again, there's not anything a local government can do anything about. And finally, well, not finally, there's other things in it, but the other thing that could seem relevant is that New York State's going to issue licenses for the creation of cannabis delivery services, which mean delivery businesses, which mean people be able to get pot delivered to their homes. My daughter in Brooklyn, I understand that goes on right now, but it's going to be legal, and local governments aren't allowed to block this. Where municipalities do have a say is whether they'll permit the sale of cannabis within the village limits, either at retail dispensaries or at on-site consumption places. We haven't really seen any on-site consumption places around, even in the States. Apparently there's somewhere between 1 and 5 in the whole country. So this is a new thing. If a municipality enacts a local law to prohibit the sale of cannabis in the village, that's an opt-out law. I'll be referring to it as the opt-out law, by December 31st, 2021. So this December 31st, retail sales and consumption facilities won't be permitted in the village. Now, the village can choose to prohibit one or the other. You can just say there can't be retail dispensaries, or there can't be on-site consumption facilities, or there can't be both. Whatever the choice is, if you decide to opt out. Unless the village adopts this opt-out law by December 31st, the sale of cannabis at retail dispensaries and on-site consumption sites will be permitted once the Cannabis Control Board develops its regulations and then issues licenses. There's separate license for the retail dispensaries and for the on-site consumption facilities. It's not expected that the sales will begin before the end of 2022 or the beginning of 2023. That's what everybody's guessing. But for villages, December, cities, towns, anybody, for December 31st, 2021 is a drop dead date. After that, there's nothing you can do to limit sales within the village. So if, let's say, the village doesn't enact an opt-out law, and it turns out that the regulations developed by the Cannabis Control Board, which will act kind of like the Alcoholic Beverages Control Law, are ridiculously lax. Let's say they're ridiculously lax, and you haven't passed this opt-out law by the end of 2021, you're out of luck. Can't do it past December 31st, 2021. If the village wants to wait and see whether the regulations are protective enough, then it could enact the opt-out law before December 31st this year, and then repeal it any time after that. You can always you can always repeal it. There's no time limit. Now, the cannabis law, and that's actually the name of the law in the law. The short title is the Cannabis Law. It does not require a municipality to consider an opt-out law or to hold a referendum, nor can a municipality just hold a referendum on whether to enact. They can't say, well, we're not sure whether to, let's have a referendum on it. You can't do that. The referendum can be held only if a municipality enacts an opt-out law, a law forbidding the sale of marijuana in its borders. Either the village, at the time it enacts the opt-out law, can also say, we're setting this up for a referendum. You can do that on your own without the petition. Or let's say you don't. The law doesn't go into effect for 30 days, and a petition can be filed requesting the referendum, and then the results of the referendum will determine whether you can sell, whether marijuana can be sold in the village. All right, now as I said, if the petition, let's say you do adopt the opt-out law, if a petition's filed, it has to have valid signatures from registered voters in the village and a number equal to at least 20% of the people who were eligible to vote in the previous general election. Not the number of people who voted, but the number of people who were eligible to vote. That's actually a pretty high number. Then the referendum has to be held on permitting, and the opt-out law won't take effect unless a majority of the voters approve it. If no petition is filed within 30 days, or if the vote on the proposition loses, the proposition would be to permit marijuana sales in the village, then the opt-out law takes an effect and retail sales won't be permitted in the village. The law also permits the village to reconsider the law after a petition's filed. If the board reconsiders its action and decides to repeal the local law, not later than 15 days before the special election or the general election is planned, then the matter won't be submitted at the election. So Larry Lonkey had asked for a flow chart, and there's not, it doesn't really, it's not the kind of thing that there's a flow chart, but I did just do a simple thing with what I think are the 4 options, which may be repetitive of what I said. But Larry, why don't you put that on the screen, and that might be a little easier to follow. So the first option is that the village can enact an opt-out law, and at the same time or soon after call for a referendum on whether the law should become effective. And the results of that referendum will determine whether cannabis sales will be allowed in the village. Or the village can enact an opt-out law, and if it doesn't say anything about a referendum, if within 30 days a citizen's petition with the requisite number of signatures is filed, the referendum must be held on whether marijuana sales or whatever the village prohibited. If you said, you know, all sales are just, you know, on-site consumption sites, and then the results of that referendum will determine whether it's permitted or not. Or the village can do nothing, and then marijuana retail dispensaries and on-site consumption sites will be permitted in the village. Right now, under our zoning regulations, both uses would be permitted in the business district as retail stores, personal service stores, sorry about that, and restaurants. They would also be permitted in the waterfront district because virtually anything is permitted in the waterfront district. And then the last option is that the village can enact an opt-out law, and if a referendum is not petitioned, at some future date, the board can vote to repeal it and making the cannabis sales and consumption sites legal. The most important date to bear in mind is December 31st, 2021. Now, the referendum doesn't have to be prior to December 31st, 2021. That when it's held depends on when the petition is filed or when the board calls for it. But the vote has to be, the referendum could be afterwards. Obviously, it has to be in the pipeline way before that. I mean, first of all, your last board meeting is December 20th. And then, you know, the local law has to be drafted and announced several weeks before and stuff, which means it has to be in, it really has to be in the works, I would say by October. If, however, the board doesn't want to have to call for a special election on it, and it wants it, the referendum to be at the next general election, then the Board of Elections, this isn't in the cannabis law, the Board of Elections has a deadline of August 1st for propositions to get on the ballot for the general election. These dates don't work with the dates in the cannabis law, and there is a glitch in the timing if you've got a November election. Hopefully that's going to be fixed. NICOM has legislation before the legislature right now, and hopefully that'll get fixed. So we'll know by the end of June, you know. But I'll stay on top of that. So that's kind of it on the retail sales and the on-site consumptions. But the question is there anything else the village can do? A little bit.
Well, Marianne, can I just ask a question about your flow chart? And thanks for the flow chart.
Yeah.
So on option 4, where the village decides to opt out before December 31st,
right.
And if there's no referendum, has an option to then opt back in at some point in the future. Can you opt in and opt out and opt in and opt out, or once you opt out, then you're locked in?
One opt out, and it's got to be by December 31st.
No, but right. So then if you opt in, then you cannot opt out again.
Correct.
Okay, and then my other question is, I guess the referendum, if there's a referendum, whether it's by petition or by the board designating a referendum, then that takes the decision totally out of the board's hands. And it's
Correct.
Totally with the vote, and that can't be affected one way or the other by the board once it goes to referendum.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
But wait, yeah, right, because they're not, I mean, they're not going to, nobody's going to have a petition to say that you can't have. I mean, the only people who are going to be petitioning are the people who want to have marijuana sales in the village.
Right, but if they petition and then lose the vote, then it's out forever.
Yeah, then it's
And the
out.
board has no option because the
Oh,
board
no,
had
no,
opted
no, no,
out.
no. Oh, yeah, that's an interesting question. If it's defeated, then can a future board, I would think a future board could enact a local law repealing that.
Repealing the referendum.
No, well, yeah, there's a referendum on it. I mean, that question hasn't come up. It's a good question, but
Yeah, I mean, that's why I wanted a flow chart, because that was the question I basically,
question.
that was right, that was basically what my question was. Is the board, by allowing a referendum, is the board totally taking themselves out of making a
okay, so let's see.
decision
So you
based
allow,
on that referendum?
you allow the referendum. Wait, let me think this out.
Right, we opt out before the 31st.
Right.
And
There's a
we either allow a
referendum.
referendum or designate a referendum, either way. And the referendum says that you have to opt out. Are we then locked in forever in an opt-out situation?
I don't know, but my guess is no. But I mean, that's something there's a lot of things that have to be talked out about this. And that's a good one. I mean, I could tell you, at least once a week, I have a conversation with NICOM about some different issues that I've seen. We're having a lot of dialogue about it. I mean, things that they haven't seen, that I picked up on and stuff. But that's a good question. My guess is you would be able to change that law in the future.
So then why have, I guess a referendum then is just to find out what the people think they want, and then we still get to decide what they
Well,
want?
no, I mean, I wouldn't think this board could, but I can't imagine that no, you know what? I'm thinking too far. I'm thinking too far ahead, but you're talking about this board. Well, the results of the referendum, I would think control. Let me see if there's this, Larry, this is the first time that question came up. It's a good one. Let me see if it's how the statute reads. Hold on a second. On the referendum.
And Larry, one quick thing, just I just wanted to point out, you said something about if the board allows a referendum. So it's a referendum can happen two ways. I know Marianne covered this, but I just want to take the word allow out. The public decides whether there's a referendum. So they always have the right to force the referendum if enough signatures are submitted on a petition. So that can happen any time, whether you say no referendum or not. The public can do that. That's what permissive referendum is. At the same time, the board, by its own action, can cause it to go to referendum without the need for any petition or signatures. Right. You know what I mean? So you can do it on your own motion. So you know what I mean? So now granted, it's a pretty high bar to get the required number of signatures to force a referendum, but it can happen. So anyway.
So, but if I'm reading this right, and this is a related question to what Larry had, the simplest, I guess, would be we can decide to opt out. And if there's no petition requesting a referendum, then that's it, we're done.
That's it. Correct.
We or a future board could then decide to opt back in, but we can very simply opt out by our own vote. And then it would need a community petition with all of the right numbers of signatures and whatever to force a referendum, or I shouldn't say force, but to call for a referendum, which then everybody would vote on, and that would decide the question. So in other words, the community can override our opt-out potentially.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
But Larry's
Okay.
questions, but Larry, I'm going to have to, the language of the statute doesn't help me on that, but I'll look into that. Maybe if I think about it a little bit more, I'll talk to somebody else about it. I mean, because that's relevant not only to this, it's just sort of on any law that there's a referendum on, can it be
changing,
essentially, can it be revisited?
like changing the date of the election. I mean, is that now written in stone because that passed?
Yeah, right. And a future board might change it back, I think.
Doesn't seem, it doesn't seem logical, but who knows?
Yeah, I think that's probably right. So,
Okay.
Can I just point out for reference that in this, which you very helpfully sent us, they spell marijuana with a J in the title, and then they spell it with an H down, that would
That's
be
correct.
something that should be consistent throughout the document. Just
So the H, we think the H is what's actually written in the law itself,
It is, yeah.
but
so
NICOM.
the J is common usage.
Yeah, but NICOM has chosen not to use that throughout the rest of the document. That's my guess.
My whole life, I've seen it spelled both ways.
That's because you went to law school. It's the only place they spell it that way.
Anyway, okay, so Larry, you could take that off the screen now. So I guess the thing is there anything else the village can do? Now, like I said, the regulations are going to be promulgated by the Office of Cannabis Management, which is going to be a division of the New York State Liquor Authority. And my guess is that the regulation of sales is going to follow that of the alcoholic beverages regulation. It does include a few requirements that, there has to be a license for retail. There's a retail dispensary license. There's an on-site consumption license. There's a delivery license. There's a bunch of different kinds of licenses. It also provides that retail dispensaries and consumption sites can't be located within 500 feet of a school or 200 feet of a house of worship, which isn't really all that far, but.
I have to just say, I think that's funny. That it is 500 feet of a school and 200 feet of a house of worship.
Yeah. It provides, well, how about this? It provides that nobody under 21 is permitted on the premises of an on-site consumption facility, but there isn't a similar provision for retail dispensaries. So, it can't be sold to anyone under 21, but there's no reason somebody under 21 can't be in a cannabis dispensary. Maybe when they come up with their regulations, they'll notice that and have something on it. Okay, now the law specifically says that municipalities can pass local laws and regulations governing the time, place, and manner of licensed retail dispensaries and on-site consumption sites, provided that the laws or regulations do not make the operation of the facilities unreasonably impracticable. No doubt that'll be the source of a lot of litigation in the not too distant future, but I'd be comfortable saying that a law that, permits the facilities only in the part of the village that nobody could get to or something isn't gonna hold up, or saying that you can't have retail sales after 5 o'clock or something like that. As a general rule, probably the safest course would be to treat the retail dispensaries and on-site consumption lounges the same way that the village treats liquor stores and bars. Not that there aren't some differences, there are some differences, but and Frank will probably have some thoughts on that. As to smoking in public, the New York State law treats marijuana smoking the same as smoking or vaping tobacco products. So that means where the New York State public health law doesn't allow smoking, or the village law doesn't allow smoking of tobacco, you also can't smoke marijuana. Now, Irvington currently prohibits smoking in parks. One thing not to put ideas in your head, but it's been discussed, is maybe a ban on smoking on sidewalks in the downtown. That's come up. I know Village of Great Neck on Long Island passed a law about 10 years ago banning smoking on public sidewalks along or within 125 feet of their main street. That ban would apply to smoking cigarettes and smoking cannabis. Again, you should treat the marijuana smoking the same as tobacco smoking. And then the other way that the municipality has some say in the marijuana sales, let's say you don't adopt an opt-out law, is there's a 30-day notification provision that so before any retail dispensary or on-site consumption license is issued, the applicant has to notify the village that it's going to open, and the village, if the village expresses an opinion for or against granting the license, maybe you say there's too many in town already or something, then the Cannabis Control Board, whatever your reasons are, they have to take it into consideration and get back to you with their decision and how they consider your suggestion. And then finally, the tax, how much tax you would get on it, there's going to be a 13% tax. 9% of it goes to the state, 1% goes to the county, and there's 3% goes to the town or village. Now, if the town does not opt out and the village does not opt out, then you've got to split the tax, either 50-50 or whatever other arrangement you may have come up with, or you may come up with. So I talked to Tim Lewis, I mean, to see where they were going. I mean, he didn't know, just like I have no idea what the board is doing, but I mean, let's say Greenberg doesn't opt out, then the Irvington share of the tax would be 1.5%. Larry, you don't have a different division, do you, with the town on splitting tax? So I guess it'd be 1.5%. So
I don't think we have
But
any.
Mary Ann, do we only get that 1.5% if we've opted in?
yeah, if you
In other
haven't,
words,
if
like
you
if
didn't
we
opt
opt
out,
out.
if you didn't opt out, if you opt out, there's not going to be any sales to get
It's
the
only
sales
for-
tax from
It's only sales in your municipality.
So it's
not-
only sales
not
within
like
the
sales
village
tax.
within
or the
Irvington.
town, or the town.
No,
Okay.
no. You would only get what for sales in Irvington.
So
The
if-
town doesn't have to split with you.
So if Greenberg, it would be unincorporated Greenberg, if they didn't opt out, but all the villages did opt out, then that would cover none of the villages, only unincorporated Greenberg, and they would
Yes,
tax. Yes,
yes.
Right.
yeah.
That
And
is
I-
a little bizarre, I have to say.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
But
just, yeah.
Wait, which is bizarre?
Oh,
I think
having,
it's, well, no, my observation is that it's bizarre that if there's a retail dispensary within the boundaries of the village, that the town would actually get a share of that.
Yeah, I know.
The town has no jurisdiction unless, I mean, I suppose there's the joint, drug alcohol task force, but that's just specific to
It makes
Greenberg.
no sense.
But there's.
I
other
actually would
laws.
try to negotiate with Greenberg to get more of it if we decide to ever do that. But
Yeah.
well,
That's interesting.
I had a question, Mary Ann. Does the law say that if it's a on-site consumption, it can also be a retail dispensary,
No, I think it can just be one or the other.
one or the other? And
They're
in-
separate licenses and they're really divided. The licenses are really divided.
And if the retail dispensary, are there limitations on other things that can be sold at that retail location? I mean, like, I don't
no
know,
alcohol, I think is one of them.
anything.
what?
No alcohol, I know.
Well, I wasn't-
Yeah, that's right. That's the only thing I saw. But you know what, Connie? There are very few regulations right now, and that's what they're going to be developing. So there could be, yes, Brian's right. There can't be alcohol.
But there could be candy and donuts and
Other munchies.
Tobacco.
I don't know.
vapes, it seems like you can sell other things, yes. That's my reading, but I think that's probably
other
my
states
interpretation.
might, but we
There's
don't.
nothing in the law that says you can't sell other things. I don't think, but I
Other than
tell you,
alcohol.
I haven't focused on it. I
So
read
can
through
it-
it twice, but
So can an existing business apply for a license to include marijuana sales? Like, I'm just completely making this up. A dry cleaning establishment, can they apply?
my guess is
Or-
not. I don't know. We'll have to.
I don't think it's any different than applying for a liquor license. I think it'd be hard, you'd have to you'd have to have a lot of things in place to be able to do it, but probably.
I think in liquor stores, there's a limit on other things that they can't sell in a liquor store, isn't
The
that?
liquor store.
Well, so there may well be. I mean, my guess is that the stuff is going to be really very similar to the.
But you can sell beer and
regulations of
wine,
alcohol
you can sell
sales.
beer with other things, so.
Yes, that's different, yeah.
It's only New York that has these weird liquor laws too, but,
So it is a quite an interesting observation that IASC had about the fact that the law is structured that you'll be making this decision by the end of 2021, at which time there probably will be no regulations developed, many of which will address the questions that you're pondering right now. So
it's completely.
to me, that seems backwards.
Well, the other thing that triggered my thinking is this law specifically says that you can't regulate, that the regulation of any advertising and signs for the marijuana establishment is going to be by the Cannabis Control Board. So, hopefully they would come up with reasonable, regulations.
Probably not the same as our ARB though.
Right, but they might not. It's not inconceivable that they would say that if signs have to be approved by a local board, these will have to be, but it specifically calls out signs as something totally within their control.
So I wonder if who knows, but if there were signs in Irvington that said, the close, go to Dobbs Ferry, Main Street, this address for the closest cannabis distributor. In other words, could there be signs put up in Irvington related to not something that's a retail location in Irvington? Or could we regulate that? Who knows?
I don't know.
I think those are more signs for the actual establishment itself than advertising. So, but who knows? There's way too much speculation here. I mean, to me, the fact that I think the other thing, Larry, other than the fact that nothing's hashed out and we have to decide on this before anything's hashed out, is the fact that you can't opt out later. Like, it just, to me, I mean, I have to imagine it's going to be like 95% opt out and 5% of people who aren't paying attention, just because. And it's not because we're going to debate the merits of cannabis use or not. It's more just the unknowns and the fact that we can always opt back in. To me, it's almost like when we had the 2% tax, the 2%, tax law, and we complied, but we still, the first year we opted out or whatever, even though we complied. It was more like a home rule kind of thing.
Right.
And I get it, use in a private home or something. I get that, but it's just ridiculous that we can't, regulate our own commerce in our own village.
So Brian, I was just going to say, you might want to change your language when you're talking about hashing things out relative to this law.
It's also absurd that the state gets 9%. I'm not surprised.
Oh, yeah.
And I actually had heard it was flipped the other way. The county was getting 3% and, the local was only getting 1%, but I'm glad it's the other way.
But the other issue you brought up about smoking and where your regulations forbid smoking, probably nobody remembers, but I brought up and thought about years and years ago about walking up the steps to Village Hall, and there was a lot of smoke and there was a thing to put your cigarettes in, and I brought up the idea that maybe smoking shouldn't be allowed that close to the doors of Village Hall. Obviously that didn't go anywhere, but I do notice there are signs over by the courthouse about not being able to smoke over there. But in general, no matter what we do with this marijuana opt-in, opt-out, that's something I had thought that greater regulation of where smoking is permitted is something that I thought should be discussed and still do.
Well, you should certainly take that up if you.
Yeah, we haven't looked at that law you know, at least in 10 years. So who knows what it says.
So can I, at the risk of putting words in your mouth, it seems to me like the logic behind all this is that it makes little sense to not pursue opting out at this stage. Again, given that issue, especially with the fact that there are no regulations established and there won't be in time, does seem to me like that's the logical way to proceed. And I'm saying that if there's any agreement in that, not that it's a final decision or anything, but you know, at least we know what we're working towards. We can start working on the local law or whatever's needed, and you know, you can start getting input from the public and that type of thing.
I actually think. Go ahead, Janice.
I agree that was really where I got to with my thinking. It would be wonderful. We have a couple of empty storefronts in town. It would be wonderful to think that there would be some tax money coming in, but at this point, there are just too many unknowns. And I like the word that was used by one of the people who weighed in, to pause. We're not saying we're making a final decision for never, but we're saying right now we're going to pause the implementation of this law to wait and see till we get some more clarity, guidance, see how it's really going to work.
I have one comment that is kind of looking in a slightly different direction, which is one of the reasons why I would tend to want to opt out is I wouldn't want to be in a position where Irvington became the only local river town that actually had a dispensary or a pot bar, because I think that the influx of people and the situation, if we were the only option, would become really unmanageable very quickly. So, you know, maybe it's a bit of NIMBY, but I would rather see, I'd feel more comfortable going forward with an opt-in condition, seeing that there were other locales in the nearby area that were actually taking up the gauntlet as well, so that the impact of people queuing up for, you know, their late night refresh or whatever you want to say it, wouldn't cause, you know, more problems on Main Street. And besides, the tax would be nice, but there's a lot of other potential issues, you know, both social and, you know, hopefully not disorderly, you know, conduct kind of stuff, but that could happen. So, you know, that was my concern about why I thought we should probably look at opting out, regardless of all the other discussion.
I thought that too, when I read that, you know, we're the only one. Yeah, so that would be problematic.
Well, I'd still like to get an answer to that question, Mary, and I know you'll get one for us.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, I will, but I'm leaning, I mean, based on what Larry said, Larry raised a good point. You know, when you change the election day by a virtue of referendum, does that mean it can never be changed back? I mean, politically it could be an issue, but legally I doubt it, but I will get back to you on that.
Yeah, and I think practically on this, I think we should, I think it's actually the sooner the better. That way you can get through a potential referendum, you get it on the ballot, all that kind of stuff. Like, to me, I don't see any reason to wait. It's not like we're going to, you know, November 1st, they're going to come out with this great guidance and we can, oh, this is such a great idea. So to me, opting out, you know, sooner rather than later, you know, and it doesn't mean that, you know, you know, personally, I'd be happy to, you know, hear people and their opinions on opting back in. But, you know, to me, it's almost like a moot point. Like, let's just opt out for now and see where everything shakes out, you know, so.
Yeah, I mean, it may be you opt out and there's enough people, they manage to get a petition so that you have to have the referendum on it, but
But I'd rather do that sooner rather than later.
okay.
Well, but I would still like to have some time for public opinion prior to our decision.
Well, but I mean, remember, this is a local law you have to pass, so you have to have a public hearing on the local law. So you would call for the public hearing and, you know, and make clear what it's about. And at that, you know, and at that public hearing, you know, maybe it'll be clear how you should go. Maybe you want to think about it in another meeting, but that's another reason to do it sooner rather than later. So you can start getting the public input.
I was going to say, I agree with Brian, sooner rather than later, just for all those reasons. So,
Especially if there's that August 1st referendum date. That's really soon.
Well, August 1st to get it on the ballot in November.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It should be
but
the
just
time.
be aware that it's right now, like I said, there's a glitch in the law that either is going to get fixed by the legislature by the end of June, or we're going to have to go in and get a court order to permit it. But anyway, but it may not happen either. So, I mean, there's actually quite a few signatures to have to get 20% of the eligible people. That's a lot.
And also, I think too, it just, I don't think our board is saying we would never entertain, either retail or, on premise. I think we're just saying that we're opting out because of legal reasons and, a lack of clarity right now. I definitely, I've been kind of a proponent of legalizing and regulating, but, and I don't really feel too NIMBY-ish, but it's just, to me, the way the law is written, it just, how many questions do we come up with without even really having a deep discussion of it? It's so, poorly done, poorly thought out. It looks like something that was done right before, to get into a budget. So,
Well, actually, they've been working on it for years and years and years. So,
yeah, and they haven't gotten anywhere, but it's, no.
was pretty exhaustive. It's not one of the worst pieces of legislation I've read, but
I do think that the whole, the regulatory piece of it, that's completely.
oh yeah.
I guess there's so many states that, was it 13 states that have it already, but, I just look forward to gambling on my phone.
We're just having our first one opening in Wellfleet this week.
Oh, nice.
Yep. It's, bank, it's called Piping Plover.
That's cute.
that's funny.
Well,
I
nice
thought
and
that was
quick.
a good.
Are you
Nice
going
and
to try it out?
What?
Are you going to try it out?
Yeah, right.
You can tell us what it's like.
She likes
Yeah,
gummy
right.
bears.
I'll tell you what, I'll send you a picture. It is the cutest building. It's just beautiful.
She's gonna bill us for legal research.
Yeah.
Right.
The piping plovers.
Site visit.
They're in danger of extinction, aren't they? They're endangered, the piping plovers.
Yeah.
Their habitat.
Right.
Their habitats are being destroyed, yeah.
By
Right.
fires and other things, so.
Well,
Yeah.
5% of all of the sales will go toward a fund that supports their
Yeah,
protection.
okay.
So
So
I
does
think,
that, are there other
Okay.
questions on it? Well, you know what? I want to, I want to recommend one thing that you watched that I thought was absolutely terrific. There was a webinar put on by Student Assistance Services. I guess it was last week or the week before, and Irvington, I don't know who in Irvington paid into it, so you would be entitled to see it. And then there were two speakers. One speaker was okay, but the second one is even though it was supposed to be nonpartisan, this guy really wasn't. He had a lot of really, really interesting studies about about what happens when it's legal, locally legalized and stuff. And they were pretty interesting. And also he had a really interesting analysis of the revenue that you get too, and the revenue versus the cost. It was really quite good. Larry Shopford, do you have that? Was that ever sent to you?
It wasn't sent, but I'm sure I can find a link.
Yeah, if you don't, I can call Student Assistance Services and ask them.
Sure.
It's about, maybe it's 40 minutes long, but it was really quite interesting, and I think you might find it helpful. I mean, although it was just he's not from New York. His experience was in I guess it was Colorado and then also Illinois. So it was interesting. Anyway.
Okay.
So is that it? That's all you?
Well,
I don't know if-
Frank is
Yeah.
here. Frank, do you have any opinion or any things that you want to add to the conversation?
No, I think Marianne covered everything, and I'm in agreement with kind of the way everything's moving towards potentially opting out and seeing how the regulations come out. And as Mark made a good point about you don't want to be the only game in town in the area, and kind of test it out. So I'm in agreement with everything that you guys have been saying.
Oh, I know the other thing that was in this video that was really helpful is the different implications of having an on-site consumption facility compared to retail dispensary was I thought really interesting. Certainly interesting from a policing perspective.
One question for Frank or anybody. Have they made any progress on, DUIs for cannabis? I know it's one of the things that stays in your system so long that it's hard to say if you were, under the influence now or if it was, last night.
Yeah, there's nothing that I've seen come out
No.
recently as far as, any future testing or levels of impairment or anything like that. That's still one of the big topics on our side of it is, determining, levels of intoxication and the testing and everything like that. So still waiting to hear about that.
It seems like a big issue, it's.
Yeah, that was one of the things this guy raised, and he explained why it is that the blood testing doesn't work, to reflect impairment. So, which wouldn't necessarily be an issue for the dispensaries, but would be an issue for on-site consumption sites if you decide to treat them differently.
Great.
I'm assuming that for purposes of this opt-out law, you want to opt out of everything.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Larry,
So-
a technical question. Is this being recorded? Because I don't see, you said it's recorded somewhere else, not here on Zoom, right?
It's recorded on YouTube.
Okay, perfect. So
Oh, right. Yeah, that's right. You never see that. Yeah, that's
No.
true.
Okay.
Yes, it's streaming live on YouTube, and that's where it's archived.
Okay, so I think, I think we're all leading the same way. There's obviously a lot of unknowns, but I think the good thing is that, our practical, for us, there's kind of a sensible way forward in the short term anyway. Long term, there'll probably be more discussions.
And we'll get that link shared so that we can check out the other background data that was.
Yeah, Larry Shopper, don't bother because what's her name? Ellen Morehouse was supposed to get it to me. I'll just remind her. But yeah, I will, and I'll try to get an answer to Larry Lonicki's question. And even if I don't get the answer, I'll let you know I didn't get one. So there's going to be a lot of open questions on this. Lot of work for lawyers on this.
Larry, I think, lost his internet, but he smartly made me a co-host tonight. So
Okay.
I get half the revenue. Great. So I think, I think that only problem is I think Larry's probably going to be running the next session, but the next part, Larry is having a storm, he said, which it seems like we kind of missed out on the storm here, knock on wood. But next is update on recommendations from the plan for reform and reimagining of the Irvington Police Department.
Okay, I'm taking off, guys. Bye.
Bye,
Take
Mary.
care.
Bye-bye.
I think that obviously we completed our review, and we had a bunch of recommendations, and we basically, Larry was going to start bucketing them into things that we can do right away, things we need to discuss more, as well as I think that's basically the two buckets. Some things are very self-explanatory. Some things were vague, and we have to discuss them. Continuing the committee is a great example of that. What does that mean? What format? What is it? What should the focus of that be? All those types of things. I think that's the plan, assuming Larry gets back on, because he had actually prepared. He'd gone through each section, I think, and we weren't going to go through it section by section, but he was going to break it down for us and kind of give us a little bit of a game plan, even if it was from 50,000 feet. But we'll see what happens if he comes back on. Otherwise, we could probably discuss at least the continuing committee. I had some thoughts on that, and we can maybe hash that out a little bit. So while we wait for Larry to come back, maybe we could talk about what I kind of thought continuing the committee meant. And I kind of looked at it, I called it the Community Advisory Board for the police, which it would be kind of a resource for, the police department, as well as the village board, and as well as community members. So if, you had an incident and, you didn't want to talk to the village administrator, the police chief, or the mayor, or trustee, you could say, you know what, I actually know the pastor of my church is on this committee, and I'm just going to talk to him anonymously. Or if the police say, hey, we host this great senior breakfast every year, can you guys help us get the word out? It's almost like a resource for the community as well as the police department, for this, just anything police related. That was kind of my 50,000 foot view of it. Maybe 8, 9 members, but it doesn't have to be set in stone. But kind of a cross representation of the village and that kind of thing. And that it can be listed on the website if people want to reach out to them. Okay, and I think Frank, you actually reviewed it with Larry as well, so maybe you can.
Yeah, so that was Larry. I'm going to try to share my screen 1 second to share this document that he created.
Make sure that I don't have to enable you.
Okay.
Looks like you're good to go, but if you can't, let me know.
Yeah, it says host disabled screen sharing.
Oh, let me, what's this? Welcome to the big show. You should be able to do it now.
There we go. Is that working?
Yep.
Okay. So the idea that we were just going to go over some of the major points here, as far as all the recommendations from the committee, starting with adopting the village's hiring initiative. A small group of us worked on adding that into the manual section, and I just put that out today, so that one's actually done. Went out fully as the committee recommended. The document was edited and added to our manual today, so that's done with. The next one on the list that he wanted to talk about was developing a plan to improve the local candidate pool. That one's in process, and it's in process. It's something we did and we worked on prior to this examination that was coming up. We put out a lot of information about the upcoming test. We handed out flyers to local businesses and churches and schools. We even went, I think Janice suggested we go to Westchester Community College, and we handed out flyers to drum up some people that go there. We hosted question and answer sessions in the courtroom for people that are interested in taking the test. And with the help of the village, we even sponsored the prep course for the exam for people that were interested in it that lived in the village. So that was the start of implementing that recommendation as far as trying to develop and improve our local candidate pool and get people interested in taking the police exam. Moving on, under training and officer wellness, implementing Project ABLE, which was one of the recommendations I believe every single person, and every single person from the police department fully supports. Since then, we've gotten letters from community groups in support of that to add to our application for ABLE. I sent our application in this past week, and I heard back from them that everything looked good, and hopefully we can start training some instructors this summer in August, maybe early September. Once we have some instructors trained, they come back here and train the rest of the department in it. So we're looking at hopefully, fall of this year to have everybody in the department trained under the ABLE program.
Could you explain again what that is, the ABLE program, Frank?
So Project ABLE stands for Active Bystandership for Law Enforcement. It's a program that really gets everybody in the police department, pretty much feeling comfortable to step in. It's almost like a duty to intervene training, that if you see somebody doing something they shouldn't be doing, or, anything like that, regardless of their rank, or, it might be your supervisor, that you feel comfortable stepping in, telling them, hey, you shouldn't be doing that, and not facing any consequences for that. And, it's really promoting that atmosphere of, everybody looking out for each other to do the right thing and making sure that everybody is doing the right thing. So that's That's ABLE training. Scrolling down towards safety and equipment. And if there's something that, I'm passing over that anybody has any questions about, just let me know and I could try my best to answer it. Body worn cameras, we've completed the policy for the most part on body worn cameras between with the PBA, and that's moved forward. I'm in the process now of acquiring the equipment through Axon, which takes a little bit of time. In the process of doing that, we're starting to figure out how we're going to, implement the actual hardware, where we're going to put it. It's going to take some time to set it up and get everybody trained on the body worn camera system and implement it. But I don't see it taking much longer than, getting it fully implemented by this summer at some point. As soon as we get it, figure out everything and getting everybody trained on it very quickly and start using them as soon as possible. Under the accountability evaluation section, improving the process for public feedback on the officers in the department, non-anonymous reporting. That's something I've been working on currently, revamping pretty much the complaint procedure online on how people can file a complaint without necessarily having to come in person. They could do it, all online. They could send it in, various different routes for them to be able to file a complaint. So it makes it a little bit easier for people that might be hesitant to come in and speak with somebody in person. That's a little bit of the easier part of the process. The part where it's fully anonymous is a little bit more difficult. That's still something we're doing some research on, seeing how some other places are handling that and figuring out the best way that could work for everybody, protecting, our officers too from, various anonymous complaints, but also being able to field anonymous complaints that have merit and investigating them and figuring out if there's any problems or issues. So that's something that's a little bit more difficult, but it is something that we are working on. Creating a civilian complaint review process. I think that's what possibly that we were talking about. Maybe depending on what the county does with their police accountability board. I know that we've talked in the past about possibly utilizing that service if that gets up and running properly, and we would join on with the county if other municipalities joined on with that. I don't really have much more information on the civilian complaint review process besides that. Pursuing accreditation, we started our application process for the accreditation. This is going to be something that's going to take quite a bit of time, most likely, over a year to 2 years possibly. But we have started a review of all of our policies in our manual and a review of what the accreditation requires us to do. Just to get prepared for that, we are going to start utilizing another program called Power DMS that we're going to be able to upload our manual to, which we'll be able to check the accreditation standards against it. We'd also be able to provide everybody with a mobile application for the manual that they could utilize at all times. And it'll also help us in publishing our manual to our website with some forward-facing documents. So people that are, interested, they could go on our website and check our manual to see, how it is we respond to certain situations or calls, or just to read through it. But the accreditation itself is going to take quite a bit of time, but we are starting the ball rolling with the application process for that. Using walking and bicycle tours is something that we're in the process of doing as is. Just as the weather's starting to break now, we're going to start getting the bicycle officers out there, whether it's down at the park, on the aqueduct, up and down Main Street. And same for the walking tours. Really want to target the areas that there's going to be a high possibility for contact with the community, and really encourage the officers to get out, talk to the community, hear any issues they might be having or any problems they might be having, and figuring out ways we could address those problems and concerns. And if there are no problems or concerns, just, to communicate and talk with folks and just say hello and meet new people in town. So that's something that we're currently doing now. And the other one he had highlight here is establishing a policy for use of business cards by police officers. We're still doing research on that and trying to figure out the best possible way to go about doing that, keeping officer safety paramount, and, deciding on you know, the right situations that needs to be done, and you know, the policy that would surround, you know, how it's done, and, you know, in certain circumstances how it's, you know, wouldn't be done. So that's something that we're still looking into as well.
And I had, first of all, I survived the storm. Holy cow.
Whoa.
But yeah, but I had actually highlighted that only, it seems like a very simple one, but I wanted to point out that as simple as it may seem, it's actually a lot more complex than you think. I mean, there's a lot involved with creating a policy of handing out a business card and doing it safely, as the chief referred to. You know, it's just, there's more to it than that, which is why we labeled it as needing more research, even though it seems rather simple. You know, buy a few business cards and hand them out. That's not quite what it is. So anyway, that was that. Any questions about what the chief went over, and or anything that's on your mind in looking at this, and if?
Well, thank you. It's obvious you've put a lot of time and thought into codifying all of the many topics we talked about over those many meetings. And this is extremely helpful to see where we are with each of the recommendations. Thanks.
Larry just lost his power again.
Frozen. You can see him, but he's frozen.
Yeah, that's just like, yeah, he said he's in a blackout at his house. So.
Does anybody have any questions about any specific recommendations that we passed by, or?
No, you know, I would just comment that separate from all of this, you know, I've expressed before that I think it would be great if there could be some type of regular review interaction between IPD and the board itself, whether, you know, Frank, you and or some other representatives could come, you know, perhaps to a work session once a quarter or twice a year, and just fill us in on stuff, you know, updated, you know, policies, anything that's changed, certainly awards and recognition of officers, you know, for us to have it once a year and talk about something that, you know, the lieutenant did back when he was a sergeant, you know, and now he's a lieutenant, or something of that nature, you know, something more frequent than, you know, just allow us to stay on top and for the IPD to know that the board's interested in what's going on.
Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah, I think we kind of went from having the chief at every meeting to saying you never have to come. So I think there's a happy medium there. I think we'll shoot for at least once a quarter, but, you know, maybe even the first meeting of every month or something. You know, you don't have to stay the whole time, but maybe, you know, we kind of have a report from the police chief as one of our items, just an update, you know, on anything that's going on or whatever.
Absolutely.
I was going to add to that. I think Larry was talking a little bit about this, but rather than simply having you come, Frank, that, you know, on occasion, one of the other officers would actually talk about a specific project, initiative, part of their job that, you know, you all know what everybody does in the police department, but a lot of it is not as obvious to the public. So focusing on, you know, a particular piece of that, you know, maybe twice a year even, I think would be helpful.
Sounds good.
Great. Well, I mean, this is a great start. Oh, Larry's back. You know, this is a great start. I think maybe we'll even kind of do a monthly catch up on this, Frank, to start, just to see where progress is. You know, there's someone here that we can kind of bang out to, like, you know, all the outside ones are going to be like a letter that we have to draft, pretty much, you know, sending a letter to Tom Avenatti and, you know, the governor or whatever. You know, so some of those we can just kind of knock off pretty easily, I think, you know, with a little bit of thought. Then there's going to be some other ones that are going to be, you know, much more difficult to implement and figure out. So, but this is a good start, you know, and if there's, you know, you don't have to wait to hear from us. If you want to come back and talk about something, I think to me, one of the biggest one is going to be the body cams. So, maybe even we can get an update, over the summer on how that's going. We don't have too many meetings over the summer, but if it's August meeting or something, they're usually pretty quiet. So that might be a good time to, maybe quickly give us a high level overview or something.
Yeah, that'd be perfect timing because hopefully by then, we could have them rolled out too. So could let you know how it's going.
Perfect.
And so I guess my question was in things that weren't directly in this document, but were added in by an appendix from the board itself. There was an issue about reviewing software, et cetera, on a periodic basis. So how do you see that going forward, Chief? Is that just as a need arises, or is that something that happens more frequently?
So I think, I kind of categorize that under the review that we have in here as well. I know you wanted to add, the idea that the software it's usually as needed basis for the most part, because we don't generally tend to get, too much new software and things like that are, much more than, a records management or document management type system. So I guess that would probably occur more as the need arises, where it would be, sent out and, an external or internal review either by the board or whoever you'd like could happen at that point.
Yeah, specifically, I'm thinking about to come to some resolution about the facial recognition packages that are being offered. I even forget the name of the company now, but that basically Clearview or something like that.
Yes.
So yeah, at some point we want to talk about that. I'm sure before the department gets more heavily involved in it.
Yeah, so our subscription to that, just so you're aware, is ended. So it'd be pending a review of usage of that before we would move forward with anything like that. So something that we could definitely set up in the near future and talk about it and see how we plan to move forward with it or not.
Yeah, I don't know how urgent it is. It's really based on if it's being driven on your side that you feel like it's a useful tool or an important tool, then it's something we definitely need to talk about and also get some additional public.
Any other questions tonight? Well, I'm still connected. Okay. Okay. I guess that's it.
So I'll make a motion to adjourn to executive session regarding collective bargaining with PBA.
Yep. And we'll give the executive session a go. Thank you.
Yeah. I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
All right.